Today in the lab I'm working again on my Amiga 4000D, and I'm going to post an update video soon around the progress of that rebuild. But today I want to focus on Envoy. A few months ago I posted a video demonstrating installing Amiga OS over the network using an Envoy boot disk. But I didn't really go into how I created that boot disk. Now, the reason for this is that setting that boot disk up was actually a real pain to do because of the state of the publicly available Envoy artifacts that we have. And there are two main problems, right? First, near as I can tell, the only publicly available source of Envoy 3 are these two ADFs that you can download from TOSEC. And these ADFs are pirated copies. I don't think they were cracked, but they were certainly reformatted from CD onto floppy disk. And that was done so by a group called Faith sometime in 1998. And these disks are fundamentally broken. The install script on them, at least with modern Amiga OSs, does not work. So I had to hack around on the install script to get this to work. Second, Envoy 3 isn't the latest Envoy version. There was an update released sometime in the very early 2000s for Envoy 3.1, which is great. But it's distributed as a series of binary patch files that I think were generated using the binary patch utility that came with the SAS-C compiler. There is an install script with this, but it kind of assumes you have original media, and it's really tricky to kind of get everything together. And I could document these steps in a video, but it'd be very hard to follow, very hard to reproduce, and just overall an unsatisfying experience. So, what I've done is I've created a script that will take the artifacts, the programs, the configuration files, the icons from the disks and from this update archive and combine them together into a new folder. Additionally, I have created a new install script that's based upon the original one, but that actually works and is a lot simpler, and I think has a better flow to it that makes it easier to set this up. So all of these things are on GitHub, and I will post the link to the Git Hub Repository with this video. So in order to run this, the script expects a couple of things to be put in a couple of places. And let me bring up the script so we can kind of talk through it here. So, first thing is the script expects for LHA to be installed and available somewhere in the path. I normally put LHA in my sysc directory, and then it's automatically in the path. You can get the latest version of LHA from AmiNet 2.15. It's freeware. If you don't have it, go get it. Next, we need copies of the Envoy disks from TOSEC, and I'll provide a link to where they are in TOSEC in the video description. Additionally, these need to be mounted, and so what that means is if you have a later version of Amiga OS like I do, 3.2 or above, you can virtually mount the ADFs by clicking on them, and then they show up as disks. If you don't have that capability or don't want to do that, you can write them to physical disks. You can use a GoTech, but regardless, we need to be able to read the data off of these disks, whether it's virtually mounted or physically mounted or whatever. Lastly, we need a copy of the Envoy 3.1 update archive. This is also available on AmiNet, and it needs to be put in the same directory as this. And once those prerequisites are fulfilled, this script is really simple in operation, and all it does is it makes a bunch of directories, unarchives stuff from the disks, copies some things around, applies all the patches, and then we should, at the end of this, have a directory with all the files we need with my new install script that's ready to use. So, I've already got LHA installed. I've got these disks mounted. I need to take this Envoy update archive and just plop it here in the same directory. And then I can run this script. And it's going to churn through. Now, why did I do it this way? So, I don't have the legal rights to distribute Envoy. And I certainly don't have the legal rights to distribute like a modified copy of Envoy. So instead of, doing something that might get me a piracy takedown or whatever on these sites, even though this is abandonware effectively, I created a script that the script is my creation, and so it modifies artifacts that you yourself have acquired rather than me distributing it. Now, if anyone watching this video knows who to contact to acquire the rights to Envoy, I would love to know that, because I would love to get this open sourced, or at least in the hands of someone that would still update it and provide releases. So, while we were talking, this script finished, and if I update this window, we now have a new directory called Envoy 3.1. This is the output of that script, is this Envoy 3.1 directory. And everything from the floppy disks that's needed, all the patches have been applied, and it has in it my new install script. So now we can take this directory and move it wherever we want to. And we can get rid of, if we so choose, all of these kind of intermediate files like the ADFs and whatnot. They are now no longer needed. In fact, I'm gonna eject these disks. So let's install Envoy now. I am running this on Amiga OS 3.2.2. I have not thoroughly tested this on other OS releases. It may work, it may not. So your mileage may vary. If you find bugs, please, I'd be happy to take pull requests against this. But do note in mind that 3.2.2 is the only OS version that I tested this against. So the installer is a fairly standard installer, and it starts off asking a series of questions where you want to install Envoy and the network configurations. And after it finishes all those questions, it copies all the files. So Envoy is normally defined in sys envoy. That's what I always do. That's the default. In theory, this should work if you place it in other locations, but I haven't really thoroughly tested that, so your mileage may vary. Next, we need to have a device driver for our Ethernet or ArcNet card. Now, in the original Envoy archive, that included some device drivers for some common cards. However, I figure most people get their device drivers, separately, or already have a TCP/IP stack like Roadshow or Miami installed, and thus I don't think it's worthwhile to include these network drivers here. However, before the install can proceed, you should make sure that a device driver is installed in dev networks for your appropriate Ethernet card. In my setup, this is fast Ethernet.device, and I already have it here, again, because I already am running a TCP/IP stack. So I just select this one that I want. Again, this will be dependent upon your Ethernet card, Xsurf, Adriadne, whatever you have. Next, you need to specify a unit number for this device. Now, if you only have one card, this is pretty much always going to be 0. But check your hardware documentation. Next, we ask if this is an Ethernet card or an ArcNet card. And I could go into why this distinction matters, but I might do that in a later video. I don't have any ArcNet cards to test, so I copied some of the logic out of here. But the short answer of why we need to know this information is in order for Envoy to coexist with a normal TCP/IP stack like Roadshow or Genesis or Miami, we have to change the Ethernet or ArcNet protocol number that Envoy uses. Now, as part of this installer, I've already pre-modified this. So unless you know what you're doing, you don't have to change this value. And the reason that Ethernet or ArcNet matters is that numerically this value is different for Ethernet than it is for ArcNet. So there's two of these, one for the IP protocol and one for the ARP protocol. Again, I have pre-modified the defaults in this installer to ensure that these can coexist with normal TCP/IP stacks. You do not need to modify these unless you really know what you're doing. Next, we need to optionally specify the owner of this Amiga. So I'm going to put my name in here, Clark, because this is my Amiga and my Amiga only. No other weirdos touch my Amiga. And next, we need a network name for this computer. So every machine on the Envoy network needs to have a unique name. So I'm going to call this A4000 desk. Now you name this whatever you want. This is in the UI. It'll show you this names, and it should make sense for you as to what computer you're associating with. Next, we need a subnet prefix. Now, without going too much into how IP networking works, you likely can just use the default here. If this overlaps with your home network, then you might run into some trouble and might want to try some other ones. But for me, I run my home network off of a different IP range than the default one. So than this default one used by Envoy. So I've never had any problems here. But going into how IP networking works is probably a whole nother video. Next, we need to specify a node number. For those that know about IP networking, this is basically we're statically assigning an IP address to this node. And it doesn't matter. Everything on the Envoy network has to have a unique number. So no two Amigas can share this same number. And that's really the only restriction. So you have to come up with kind of your own numbering scheme. I'm just going to put 88 in here because I know that is unique. These values range from 1 to 254, which effectively is the max cap of a simple network like this. Now, if you have more than 254 Amigas that you want to network together, first of all, I'd like to see your house. But second of all, there is a possible way to do that, but it's going to require a lot more complex setup that I'm going to say is out of scope for this video. So the important thing is just, in a simple network configuration, every Amiga has to have a unique name and this unique number. And we're given an option to modify the IP address if we need to, but this is just taking the prefix and the node number from the previous couple steps and giving us an option if we need to modify it. Are we using the default subnet mask? For this, we're going to say yes. Again, IP networking, very complicated subject. In a simple case, it's usually yes. The next question about a default router. As I was saying earlier, some things are not implemented. This is one of them. So I plan to implement it in the future. For a default case, the answer is usually no. And so we're hitting no. Same thing with a realm. This is not implemented, and for a simple case, the answer here is no. So that was the last of the questions, and as soon as I finished that question, it started to copy items. And it doesn't take very long at all, because it's just a hard disk to hard disk copy. So now we can proceed. Now, generally here's where I reboot. And then on reboot, Envoy is active, so we'll do that right now. And I'll cut while we reboot. So reboot is complete. and Envoy now should be active. And if we go look in the workbench, look in Workbench Startup, we'll see the Accounts Manager and Services Manager. These are two of the Envoy services, and these icons in the Workbench Startup make Envoy start every time that I start the machine. And if I go into the Envoy directory, configuration, I can see all of my icons for the various Envoy programs that are available. So to test, let's go to File System Import. And as you can see, when we open this up, we can see all of the Amiga hosts on the Envoy network, right? So A4000 Desk, that was the name that I gave to my Amiga 4000 desktop. So this is that one. And then A4 Tower, as you can imagine, is my Amiga 4000 tower that's sitting in the other room. So if I select this one and put in the default username and password, which is admin, capital A, admin for both username and password, I can now see the volumes that are on my Amiga 4000 tower, and I can mount them if I want. So let's go ahead and mount one of these. Let's mount my software volume. So I cache stuff that I download from AmiNet and other places into a volume here, so I don't have to always go re-download them and find them. And we can see that mounts pretty quick, and I can look in here and see things like all my drivers, all of my networking stuff, etc. So that in a nutshell is how you use my scripts to create a new Envoy 3.1 archive that you can then use to install Envoy with. Now this is still, as I've said multiple times before, work in progress. But the source code to what I've done is up on GitHub, and if you want to contribute to it, please do. I'll accept pull requests. And I intend on tuning this a little more in the future to implement some of the missing things in the install script. But we'll see what time allows for me. At the moment, right now, this is good enough for my purposes, and it allows me to very easily get Envoy up and running repeatably on all of my systems. Now, I'll end this video with one last little tidbit for this, and that is that this new Envoy installation directory archive that we have here, if you delete a few things from this, it fits on a standard floppy disk. And that's really handy for me, at least, because that means that I can bring this over to a machine without a CD-ROM drive, without an active network connection, and kind of bootstrap it into my network and then pull additional software over the network. So in order to make this fit on a floppy disk, I delete the developer directory, which is the developer kit, so header files, things like that, stuff that a normal user wouldn't need unless you're actively developing Envoy software. And then also I delete the locales. So these are the German language catalogs that my installer doesn't install, and for me personally, I wouldn't even be able to understand if they were installed. You might have to force delete some things with permissions, but with that, if we look at the size of this, it fits easily in under 750 kilobytes, so it'll fit very easily onto a standard Amiga floppy, which again is great. So with that, I'm going to close out the video. Hope this is useful, and thanks again for watching.